Hello students, my name is Moon and this is He200, the EMT program here at Queensborough Community College, Chapter 36, Ambulance Operations. There are four types, three main types and a miscellaneous, and here's the difference. Type 1 is just a pickup truck with a box attached to the back. That's it. And you'll know you're in the Type 1 because it looks like this. But then when you look from the passenger's side into the patient cabin, at most there'll be a tiny little window that you can look through. Type 2 is the minivan that you've seen around here, and you can walk straight from the passenger compartment and the driver compartment to the patient compartment through a tiny, very, very narrow hallway. And it's got the side doors. It's just your average, typical minivan here. Type 3 is a purpose-built ambulance. So they didn't go to the auto dealer and buy themselves a pickup truck or a minivan. They actually had an actual ambulance built from the bottom up. And so it has the hallway for you to walk through to the patient cabin. And it's also quite larger. And then there's the miscellaneous for different roles. For example, there's the bariatric ambulance, which has ramps and extra heavy-duty stretcher. So the rest of the chapter is in these segments. Oh, by the way, this table is not in your textbook for your class. Step 1, preparing for the call. There's actually a previous phase. I would say phase 0. Phase 0 is when you prepare for the shift, and then sure enough there's phase 10 or phase N+1, which is end of the shift. So let's talk about the beginning of your shift first, because you show up is preferably at least 30 minutes before the beginning of your shift. So if your shift starts at 10 p.m. you really should show up at 9:30, but if you're new at this job, you really should plan on showing up at 9, an hour early. The extra 30 minutes is because of traffic, for commute. Maybe the subway or the bus is late, or there's a delay, or there's traffic, and so you want to make sure you're not late. So show up an extra 30 minutes to whatever you plan on, to whenever you're planning on being there. And then for your ambulance shift, you want to at least show up about 30 minutes before the beginning of your shift so that you can go through the checklist. The checklist these days is electronic on your laptop or your Toughbook. It's not paper anymore. But guess what? What happens if your laptop is not working? What happens if the internet is down? Is that an excuse for you to not check your ambulance through and through at the beginning of your shift? And New York State says no. The New York State inspector, who does surprise inspections at ambulances at hospitals, they say no, that's not an excuse. So even if your laptop is not working, then there are paper copies somewhere, usually under the driver's side chair or the glove compartment, and you have to fill it out anyway. So this is called doing an 800, a Part 800. And the reason why we in New York City call it an 800 or doing the 800 is because it's part of the New York State Department of Transportation Part 800 law. And it specifies exactly what an ambulance working in New York State has to have. New York City is allowed to add to the list, but they cannot take away from the list. And at the BLS level, it's the same. There's nothing added to the New York State list. Anyway, you not only want to make sure that every item on this Part 800, and there's multiple pages, every item is present, but everything is in working order. So you have to not only check that it's there, but you have to test it to make sure it still works. And it's gonna just specify how many of each, 24 4x4s and a dozen 5x9s. You're supposed to have, if I remember correctly, it's been a while. You're supposed to have a dozen adult collars, and like 6 or 8 pediatric collars, etc. You're supposed to have a working portable suction, meaning that the previous crew had plugged it in so that it's been recharging when not in use. You have to have a working AED. That means it's fully charged, which means the previous crew had plugged it in and charged it when it was not in use. All that stuff, right? Going through the ambulance, making sure everything is there. And it's a good habit too, especially if you're new. It's good to go through and verify every item that you're supposed to have is, because there you remember or you experience where it is. And so in the middle of a critical patient call, you don't have to start hunting for it. If your tech leader says, give me a Yankauer, give me another Yankauer, you know exactly which cabinet, which part of the cabinet it is. For example, do you know where your triage tags are? Huh? When you did your rotations, did you actually visualize the triage tags? That's not something that everybody uses. What about the canisters for the respirator masks? You're supposed to have them. Where are they? What about the one pocket mask? Remember the pocket mask you used in the CPR? And you're thinking, well, I'm BLS now. I don't do pocket masks. I only do BVM. Well, that may be true for the most part, but New York State says you have to have a CPR pocket mask. And so every ambulance has it, but since they rarely reach for it, they kind of shove it into the back of the corner of one of the cabinets. Where is it? So it's good to go through it. My very first 800, I was at a volunteer ambulance company, and my very first shift at that volunteer ambulance company, they said, oh, you just graduated? Congratulations, here's the list, go check it out. Go do the 800 on the ambulance. And so it took me an hour. It took me a whole hour, because half the stuff I didn't even know what they look like. Yeah, we learned about it in class, but it's not like in scales they brought out every piece of the 800 and showed us what it exactly looked like, right? So there are many items that I didn't even know what they looked like. I sure enough didn't know what they were called. So even if it's on the list, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be looking for. And sure enough, and of course I didn't know exactly where it was. And so I spent an hour going through the ambulance looking for everything. With experience and practice, that time shortens, and then eventually it gets to about 30 minutes to check every little thing. And also your medications. Every medication you carry, you have to check for expiration date and for intact seal. And of course the number of vials, depending. So it can be well. Did you know that there's a compartment under where you're sitting? Very convenient. There is a section in the 800 where you have to check out your ambulance the same way you would check your own motor vehicle if you're the owner of a motor vehicle, like checking the tires, tire pressure, checking the oil level, making sure the headlights work, the brake works, the turn signals, making sure the side windows are all okay, all of that good stuff. And yeah, those of you who own a car, you may say, you rarely check those, and I have to admit I rarely check them too. But here's the thing: when you are operating your ambulance and then one of those parts fail, you can't really say it's not my fault, because it's on the 800 that you checked it, and your signature at the bottom of the 800, it's a legal document that said you did check it, and you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, that you checked it and it was good. And now your post-accident, your ambulance caused an accident, and the other parties are suing your ambulance agency because the inspector confirmed that the failure of that part on your ambulance caused the accident, and now they're gonna zero in on your signature where you confirm that that part was working. I always made sure all of these blinky lights was working, all the siren sounds were working, every one of the siren sounds. The side mirrors, you kind of know right away if it's good condition or not, right? Because you got to use it. Yes, you have to drive the ambulance. If you work for any ambulance agency, in fact, the agency where you've done your rotations with our program, that I won't say their name because this video is going up on YouTube, but it's their policy that all crews must change roles at the middle of their shift, which means one person's driving, one person's teching, and then at the middle of the shift they have to switch roles and the tech becomes the driver. And if they don't, then the dispatcher will know because there's a camera in your driver compartment looking right at you so they can see who's been doing what. So you have to be able to drive these ambulances. Now that statement makes you nervous that these ambulances look kind of big and you've never driven, you're a citizen of New York City, right? So you're a resident of New York City, you never got a driver's license. Well, you need to get on that because they're not going to hire you without a driver's license. So now that's just a car. What about something as big as, let's go back here, as big as one of these gigantic things? They're kind of intimidating, and as a new driver, the lanes of the road seem so narrow until you finally get used to it. So one thing you can do is once in a while rent a truck from the rental car company, like one of these, right? Rent a truck about this size from the rental car company, or maybe start with a van and then work your way up. So do your own little training program to learn how to drive these things. Okay, so windows and mirrors. And so, okay, that's outside of the ambulance, and I won't go into the details of what you're looking for because that's what the 800 is for, to make sure you don't forget any little detail. The inside now, this is a serious matter. The previous crew is supposed to wipe everything down at the end of their shift so that the ambulance is ready for your shift. But people being people, maybe they may cut corners, maybe they may not do a thorough job of cleaning. And so it's not only depending on like how well you know the previous crew, what their reputation is. You know what? Don't even trust even people with good reputations. It's a good idea to wipe everything down yourself to make sure it's clean for yourself. It's up to your standards. So you wipe down everything in the passenger compartments and the patient compartments and the driver's side with disinfectant just to make sure for yourself that it's safe. And also by doing that, by eyeballing every square inch, visualizing every square inch of the surfaces, which you can't not do because you're wiping it down, you'll notice if there are any stray needles. I know BLS ambulances don't carry needles or don't use needles. However, sometimes the ambulances are used, those ambulances may have been used by a paramedic in the previous shift. And many times, if the patient is critical, what would happen is the paramedics show up at your call, they take over control of the patient, but they then insist that everybody goes in your ambulance. What happens then? So the two paramedics jump into the back of your ambulance, take care of the patient, and you and your partner BLS, one of you drives your ambulance and the other one drives their paramedic ambulance. So once again, you have to have a driver's license. You have to be a competent driver. But now what's going on? Neither you nor your partner knows what's going on in the patient compartment, what those two paramedics are up to. And sometimes the medics get forgetful. They use a needle on the patient. They set it aside. They're supposed to put it in the sharps container. Sometimes they forget. and so it ends up on the seat. Sometimes usually ends up on the floor, but sometimes it ends up on the seat. And then in all that excitement, they forgot to put it back. And then guess what? Then it's just sitting there like a landmine, waiting for the next person to sit down on the seat and get poked by a dirty needle. So that's another reason to hopefully encourage you to wipe down all the cushions and surfaces. And by wiping down a surface, it's forcing you to pay attention to every square inch. So that way, if you come across a dirty needle or any kind of needle hanging out there, you can now put it in the sharps container, your own sharps container. Windows, horn, siren, I said that. Seat belts, absolutely critical, non-negotiable. They have to be working. And then fuel level. Okay, this one you have to do. And your senior partner will never forget. At the beginning of your shift, after the 800, and just before you declare yourself 1098 available for a call, you have to go to the gas station and top off the tank. Assuming that, if the fuel gauge is not at max, you have to top it off. Even if it's like just a little below max, maybe it's like 5/6 full or 7/8 full, you still have to top it off. Because that's the rules. I don't know of any agency that doesn't have that rule. You have to top off your tank at the beginning of your shift. After all, what if it's a busy day? What if you never get a chance to stop at the gas station? What if you get a really, really far away call, and it's happened? Every crew is supposed to top off the tank once again at the end of their shift. So sounds like the next crew should never need to go to the gas station, because if the crews always fill up at the end of their shift, then the tank should always be full at the beginning of your shift. But once again, things happen, and just saying it was the previous crew's responsibility is not good enough if you're in the middle of a job and then you see that you're critically low on fuel. So always top off the tank at the beginning and the end of your shift. Let's see, once you turn on the engine, then the dashboard lights will indicate if anything is a problem. If anything is a problem, you have to alert your supervisor immediately. Let's see, of course you should make sure the brake works. You'll know if the brake is not working because as you ease out of the garage, then you'll know if it's not working. Let's see now, operations. For those of you who are wondering why am I clicking through these slides so quickly, well, you have a pause button, right? And you're supposed to be reading the chapters, right? So you can always pause whenever you see something you would like to look at a little longer. And of course, it's absolutely your right to also go to YouTube and go to your YouTube screen, and around here should be a settings button where you can change the playback speed, so you can set it to faster, playback speed faster than normal, because I've been told that I talk a little slow, and it's okay. I listen to other people at faster playback speeds too. Always turn on all the lights. Check every one of the settings on the lights and sirens to make sure they're still working. Yep, all of these. And how do you know, what are they called? I don't even know what they're called. There's just a bank of light switches. So from one side to the next side, I just click, 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 click each one. I click each one, I get outside, walk around the ambulance, 360, come back, click the next one, get outside, walk around the ambulance, 360, like that, to make sure each one is working. At the beginning, when you show up at the base for your shift, the radios are in their chargers somewhere in the office, somewhere in the supply room or office. So go in, get a fresh battery. They'll show you how to make sure how to tell if the battery is full or part empty. So start with a fresh battery on your radio. You should check the onboard suction. This is important. You don't want to end up with a portable suction with a dead battery. And in Skills, we teach you how to check that the suction pressure is good enough. Check it for both the portable suction and the onboard suction. The backup camera. I think what they really mean to say is rear-facing camera. This is the first. It was the ambulance agencies where I discovered that this was a thing, where there's a camera pointing out the back of the ambulance, showing exactly what's there as I'm going in reverse. And ever since then, I've been in love with the concept, and I dreamed about the day. Well, what I finally did was I went out, and when I got a dashboard camera, because, to protect myself legally in an accident, I made sure it had a rear-facing camera too. And oh my God, parallel parking has been so much easier with rear-facing cameras. If you have a car and you don't have a dash cam, what are you doing? What are you doing? If you have a car, you really need a dashboard camera, because if you get an accident, of course the other party is going to blame you, and you're going to blame them, and it's your word against theirs. But if you have video evidence of exactly what happened, then it will protect you. So get one, and then while you're buying a dash cam, then make sure it has a rear-facing feature too, so your parallel parking is so much easier. Summary. So here's some things. You don't have to write this down, because this and like 100 other things will be on the list. So just go through the list from top to bottom. Make sure that any battery powered devices are fully charged. And then when you're done, you sign at the bottom, or if it's on the tough book, then you go through the procedure to verify, to lock it in, to verify that this is all true. This is true, and the truth, nothing but the truth, so help you. You swear by your name, and then confirm it and electronically sign it. And then once you click the submit, that's it. It's locked in. You cannot change it because it's a legal document. Let's see. And then you go to the gas station, you top off the tank, and then you declare yourself ready for a job. So good luck. If you work for a private transport agency, then one of these days you may get the opportunity to get on a medic ambulance, an ALS ambulance. And you think, how can I do that? I'm not a medic. I know, but private agencies seem to have this setup where they have a BLS driver and a paramedic tech in the patient compartment. So when in that setup, then no, you don't have to switch roles halfway through the shift. Of course, then the medic stays as the tech the whole shift. But now what does that mean? That means that you have this opportunity to watch a paramedic in action, to be in a paramedic or ALS ambulance, and you need to take it seriously. And by taking it seriously, I mean actually show up early to do your half of the 800. I said in early that the paramedic 800 is twice as long, because we have everything in the BLS ambulance plus all the paramedic stuff, and it takes a full hour for me to go through everything. It would help a lot if when the EMT, when I was in that role, or when I was in that job, it would help a lot when the EMT crew member partner show up and they check the 800 for the BLS stuff. That way it frees me to focus on the ALS stuff. And why do I say this? There are times when the EMT partner would show up like 5 minutes before the shift, 5 minutes before the shift, and then say hi, and then go to the driver's side, and then start watching TikTok on their phone. And I'm like, WTF, is that all you're gonna do? You think you're just the driver? You don't think you're a EMT, you're just an ambulance driver? Because that what this guy is doing, he is signaling to me that he had no intention of doing his side of the job, of his side of the 800, because he showed up 5 minutes before the shift began. He left no time to check through the BLS stuff. So he assumed that I would take care of everything. And then I would, because I don't want to be stuck with missing equipment. So 30 minutes left before the beginning of the shift, my partner's still not there. What do I have to do? I have to hurry up, finish the ALS side, and then check the BLS stuff. And grumbling to myself, where the hell is my partner? So that starts the shift with me feeling negative about my partner. On the flip side, for those partners who showed up nice and early and worked with me to check the ambulance through and through, then I start the shift having really positive thoughts about my partner. And there's been a couple of times where I was so impressed with the professionalism of my partner that after the shift, I went to the supervisor and I wrote a letter of commendation. And I said, this guy is this guy's a really good worker. He was very professional, etc. So, all right. So you finished filling up at the gas station. You drove to your 89 and you're standing by waiting for your first call. And then the call arrives. Now what do? So you do the scene size up, which is, BSI, scene safety, number of patients, MOI, NOI, consider additional resources, consider C-spine, right? And that's pretty much what is paraphrased over here. You read the KDT, the keyboard data terminal, you read the screen, you consider all the information that is available at the time. And not all of this is available, especially if it's a 911 call, then very, very little is available. You just go. But from the little you get, you try to decide if you're going to get C-spine, if you're going to get where are the collars, right? Where is your longboard? If you need additional resources, etc. And so you start going to the job, to the scene, to the address. And that is the most dangerous phase for EMTs. Why? Because you're going lights and sirens most of the time, and because you don't know what's there. Maybe the caller said they're having a tummy ache, but you don't know if they're actually having a MI. So you go lights and sirens unless specifically told not to. And so, but then with the lights and sirens going, that creates the danger phase on both sides. The driver, your driver, going lights and sirens, gets their adrenaline pumping and starts making them consider doing things that are a little risky. And hearing the lights and seeing the lights and hearing the sirens makes the other motorists nervous. Not all of them, but makes some of them nervous, and it makes them start acting erratically. And so, out of a nervous attempt to do the right thing, they sometimes veer into your lane, obstruct your pathway, and then you get into an accident. The other week, I showed you videos of ambulances getting into accidents, and don't let it stop there. Go on YouTube and search for the phrase ambulance accident, and you'll see lots and lots of videos of other ambulances getting into crashes. Sometimes they have a patient going to the hospital. Sometimes they're not yet with the patient, they're going to the call. Either way, they get themselves into a rollover or other kind of collision. So you must always wear your seatbelt. and you have to act defensively. The driver has to drive defensively. What does that mean? Because for those of you who took driver's ed, took a class to get your driver's license, you were shown a video, and you, for many of you, maybe you found a way to like pretend to pay attention, but actually you're not. And then the video has some boring guy saying boring things, so you kind of zoned out. And you just remember the word defensive driving, and you say, yeah, I'm a very good driver. Everybody thinks they're a good driver, but still, the fact remains that accidents happen all the time. So there's a disconnect there. If everybody thinks they're a good driver, but accidents still happen all the time, then something is not connecting. Something's not making sense. Defensive driving means, for me at least, it means assume everybody else is incompetent and will do something stupid at any second. And you, the driver, has to be ready for that. So as I'm going down the road, whether I'm in an ambulance or whether I'm driving my own car, I'm always ready for that other car to veer in front of me, to cut me off, to drift on me or something. And then if they do, I'm ready. I'm mentally prepared, and instead of being aggressive and trying to teach them a lesson, I retreat to safety. Because studies have shown that if you're not aggressive, if you're a defensive driver, if you let people cut you off, if you don't get into road rage, then at worst you get to your destination maybe 5 minutes later. If you have a 30-minute trip, you'll get there 35 minutes. If you have an hour trip, you'll get there in an hour and 10 minutes. And that is well worth the price. It's well worth the benefit of reducing your risk to get into an accident. If you think, no, that's unacceptable, 5 minutes longer is unacceptable, I have places to go, I have people to see, I'm too young, life is too short, get out of my way. And if you ever violate my right of way, I will make you regret it. With that kind of an attitude, you've really increased your risk of getting into an accident. And now instead of showing up 5 minutes later, you show up several hours later, or never at all, because you got into an accident, you have to pull over, police are getting involved, maybe there's even road rage and now somebody got hurt. All of that because you just could not wait. You could not wait those extra 2 seconds, and if somebody cuts you off, you had to teach them a lesson. That's road rage. So the opposite is defensive driving. Now, if you may be thinking now, when you hear me say this, that's always assume somebody else is going to make a mistake and crash into you. Isn't that a stressful way to live? No, it's not a stressful way to live. It's called situational awareness. It's called being alert. It's called defensive driving. It's called driving responsibly. That is the way you're supposed to be. So by living that life, defensive driving, then eventually you get used to that mental state. And you know what's more stressful than defensive driving? Road rage. Getting your blood pressure up, getting red mist in front of your eyes, fantasizing about harming the other driver is extra stressful. So that will definitely lead to heart disease, high blood pressure. But instead, when you get used to thinking in a defensive driver mode, then that's not something extra new. It's just being alert and being careful. And then there's another benefit that you may not have heard, which is by being defensive, by assuming everybody, like literally everybody on the road is about to do something stupid, and be prepared for it. When you finally get to your destination and nothing bad has happened, then you can look back on all these people who never made a mistake, and you can think, these people were awesome. Everybody on the road today did their job. Nobody did anything stupid. my faith in humanity is restored. Good job, everybody. Everybody obeyed the laws this time. So actually, I end most all of my trips feeling good about the people in my community, that nobody did anything stupid this time. Once in a while, somebody does something stupid, and I'm well prepared. I avoided getting into an accident. People cut me off, so what? I showed up 5 minutes later than I planned, which is why I usually leave 35 minutes early. This slide is about the things you've learned in driver's ed, which is follow a minimum safe distance. And how do you know that? Well, in driver's ed, they'll teach you when the car ahead of you passes some kind of landmark, like a pole or a line in the road or anything visualized, then you count 3 Mississippis. It should take about 3 Mississippis for that landmark to finally pass you. So when there's 3 seconds of travel time between the car in front and you, then you are at a safe distance. And the meaning is that no matter what the speed is, by having 3 seconds of distance, then if the car ahead of you slams on their brakes and then you immediately slam on your brakes, you'll need that much distance to finally slide to a stop. You do understand that when you slam on your brakes, you don't stop immediately, right? When you slam on your brakes, you will continue to slide forward through the momentum, which is an equation of mass and speed. And so you need that distance to stop in a moment's notice. Now, if you follow too closely, you don't have that distance, or if you're following far enough away and you get complacent and you think now is a good time for me to watch a video on my phone, that means you don't have the 3-second warning, because when you say, I took my eyes off the road for only a second, give me a break. Well, that means you went from 3-second warning to 2-second warning. That's not enough time for you to come to a safe stop if the car ahead of you had something catastrophic happen to it. And that's why you should not be driving distracted. But you know all that, right? Blind spots are the cones of vision on the side mirrors. And just because you don't see a car in your side mirror, it doesn't mean it's not there. It's probably in your blind spot. So pay attention in driver's ed when they teach you about the blind spot. In fact, actually, a lot of people I notice, they angle their side mirrors so that it helps them see directly behind it. But that's not why you need a side mirror. The purpose of your side mirror is not to help you see directly behind you. The purpose of the side mirror is to let you see what's aside of you, where your blind spots are. You should angle your side mirrors to maximize the coverage area of the blind spots around you. I was thinking of putting up a graphic, a picture, but for those of you who've gotten the driver's license, you know all about the blind spot. For those of you who have not, well, you have to get a driver's license if you want to work as an EMT in New York State. If there is an accident or some incident, never get out of the ambulance. It was true in the old days, and it's extra true now. Never get out of the ambulance. Tempers are hot, emotions are charged. And then there's an added thing. When they get into another car gets into an accident with an ambulance, there's an extra variable, which is the other driver may think they can sue the city and get a cash windfall, and so they have an extra incentive to make it your fault. Tempers start getting heated, and so you are in danger there. If you do get into an accident, immediately contact your dispatcher, and the dispatcher will direct a police to your location. Stay in the ambulance. Keep the windows up. Now, you may think, well, I'm an EMT, I should check if the other driver is okay. Well, all right. If if you, after you've been in an accident, you look at the other car, you see nobody's getting out, then okay, because you do have a duty to act. You are on duty, right? So you have a duty to act, and so you may want to go and check them out, see if they need assistance. But if their passengers of the other vehicle are jumping out and yelling at you, you need to retreat to safety. As an ambulance operator, then you've seen the TV and movies, you've seen the segments where the ambulance is roaring down the road, lives are at stake, minutes count, lights and sirens going, and dramatic music is playing on the background, and so you're thinking, oh, I can't wait to do that, I can't wait to be a hero, I can't wait to race down the street. Actually, that's not how reality works. Shock? Are you shocked? Is that a surprise to you, that driving an ambulance, lights and sirens is not that exciting? The meaning of it, the idea that you're going to potentially save somebody's life, that's exciting. Or you're going to enter a situation that's very complex medically, that's exciting. But the race car attitude has no place in an ambulance. You're actually not supposed to go faster than the speed limit, because the speed limit is there for a reason. It's not only to collect speeding ticket revenue, as some conspiracy theorists say. The speed limit is set so that the speed of the vehicles match the condition of the road and the ability of the road to keep motorists safe. So if you exceed the speed limit, then all of that engineering that went into defining the speed limit is not applying to you, and you risk getting into a rollover, you risk getting the ambulance into a collision. So actually your ambulance agency policy is never exceed the speed limit. Well, wait a minute, like on the highway the speed limit is 55. Am I supposed to go 55 when you're used to going 65 in your own motor vehicle? Yes. When everybody else is going 65, are you supposed to go 55 with lights and sirens? Yes. Well, don't I need to go save the patient's life? Yes. But the laws are set that they understand that you are going the speed limit. So the patient and the patient's family cannot sue you for not breaking the speed limit. That doesn't make sense. They can't sue you for not breaking the law. You'll get there when you get there. And remember, the first two things in patient assessment is always BSI, scene safety. The speed limit is to save your life. Your life is more important. Your safety is more important than anybody else. You are the most important person there. You have to protect your safety. So stay on the speed limit. All right, then what about and also, okay, so I should say this. Did you know that driving while sleep deprived is equivalent risk to driving drunk? Studies have shown that time and time again. What happens is, if you've been not having enough sleep lately, your reaction time and your sense of judgment is impaired, as much as if you had a blood alcohol level of 0.08%. So which means that if an incident happens on the road, you are less able to handle it, react in time. And again, I'm somebody out there, one of you is going to say, it's okay, I'm a very good driver, I'll sleep when I'm dead, I will, sleep is for the weak, all those phrases. And on top of that, the problem in EMS, another problem in EMS is that everybody in EMS has at least two jobs, at least a full-time job and another part-time job, because EMS does not pay enough. Especially BLS does not pay enough, but actually paramedic doesn't pay that much more either. So everybody in EMS has at least two jobs. Many of them have two full-time jobs, which makes a question. If you're working 80 hours a week, when do you get a chance to sleep? Because, like, assuming you're only paid for the 80 hours, but you're spending like 2 hours each day commuting to, and then you have your other personal responsibilities. You have to eat. So when do you get a chance to sleep? And I'm worrying that many of them don't. The first thing that gets sacrificed is sleep. But then that they put themselves into this situation, and there are stories of EMT or BLS drivers falling asleep at the wheel in the middle of a call. So if you are in that situation, then you got to make a decision now. Do you go on pretending everything is okay because you don't want to rock the boat, you don't want to get the supervisor angry, or do you realize that your number one responsibility is your own safety? And if something coming from you is threatening your own safety, you need to speak up. Siren syndromes cause drivers to drive faster in the presence of a siren. So it's not just the ambulance driver driving faster as the siren gives them adrenaline, but the people around the ambulance start to behave erratically or unpredictably. Sometimes when the vehicle is backing up, it causes an accident, and so you're really supposed to use a spotter, especially if you're backing up into the garage at the end of your shift. You definitely need a spotter. The thing about driving these large trucks is that it's harder to know if you've bumped something. When you're in your own little sedan, personal vehicle sedan, you may have gotten this technique of, like, you can feel when the bumper like brushes against something, so you know to stop moving. You won't get that feeling in a truck. Once you finally feel something is not right, you've already caused quite a dent. And so it's the policy of the agency. Every agency I've been, it's the policy that the partner has to get out and be a spotter, which means stand in the back in full view of the side view mirror, so that the driver can see his signals or her signals, and the spotter will then can see clearly how the ambulance is doing, and then give you directions like left, right, keep going, etc. Since the ambulance is much bigger, much heavier, carrying more stuff, the stopping distances are longer. You just have to realize that. Stopping distances are longer. The ambulance is top heavy, and so they tend to roll over more. And those videos of ambulance crashes, you see them rolling over all the time because they're so top heavy. Hydroplaning is if you're driving over a wet surface and there's so much water that the tire no longer has physical contact with the road, then it no longer works like a tire. It works like a boat. And the weight, the momentum of the ambulance continues to push it in one direction, and you're trying to steer or brake and nothing is happening. That's hydroplaning. It's really hard to know. Well, hydroplaning is a function of speed. The faster you're going, the more likely and the worse the hydroplaning gets. And so if you're going at like normal speed for that road for dry weather, that is not valid anymore for wet weather. If you see any sign of water on the road, you have to be ready that hydroplaning may happen. You really have to slow down. Turning in a truck, not just an ambulance but a truck, is like this. As a sedan, as a passenger vehicle, a regular civilian passenger vehicle, you're used to having way more control over your car and you're in a turn, But then with an ambulance that's top heavy and longer and wider, you have to realize that that's not the case. That the front wheel will go in one direction and then the back wheel will go in another direction. Just be aware of that. Never drive under the influence. So yeah, you know you're not supposed to drive drunk, but did you know that you're also not supposed to drive stoned? Yes, I know marijuana is now legal in New York State, but alcohol is legal in New York State, but you still can't drive drunk. So even though it's legal to buy marijuana, you're still not allowed to drive drunk. I drive stoned, because it affects your response time and judgment. Think about it this way. Would you mind if your surgeon was stoned or was high on marijuana? Like it's time to get your gallbladder taken out, and your surgeon comes in on the day of the surgery to like do a final check, and you can smell marijuana on his breath, on his clothes, you can see his red bloodshot eyes, and you say, "What's wrong, doc?" And the doc says, "Don't worry, I just took a hit before I saw you. I'll probably take another hit before we start cutting, but it's okay, I'm a very good surgeon." Is that going to be okay with you? So you're not supposed to operate any heavy machinery or do any kind of critical, complex work on any kind of influence. Just because you're working for the city doesn't mean you are immune from the laws of the city. So if you get into an accident under the influence while working for an ambulance company, you can still be arrested, you can still go to jail. If you're taking any prescription medications that can impair your ability, you have to take that into account. If the medication clearly says do not operate motor vehicles while you're taking this medication, then you cannot work in the ambulance that day, because it's going to be in a motor vehicle. How would you know if you can or cannot? You read the directions. How many of you read the directions on your prescription medication? A powerful drug that a doctor prescribed for you. How do I know it's powerful? Because they have to prescribe it. It's not available over the counter. And why wouldn't you know as much about it as you can by reading the instructions? Don't break the law. Okay. In any discussion about ambulance operation, somebody in the group is going to say the word due regard, whether it's at the bar or at the 89 or at the operator's lounge if you have one, or in class. And so here's what we mean. Due regard, due means what you're supposed to do, and regard means being extra careful. And this is a general term to mean what I previously defined as defensive driving, but then layer on top of that, careful operation of the ambulance. Because what we're going to talk about in the next few slides are some of the things you can do in an ambulance on a call in a lights and sirens mode that regular vehicle operators are not allowed to do. So the previous slide I said don't break the law, but you can kind of bend it if it's justified. But that said, the reason why laws exist is to protect people. Now, never mind your conspiracy theories. I'm telling you, the laws were created to protect people, to reduce the risk of accidents, injuries. What they're saying is you're allowed to bend some of the laws, but then by bending the law, if you cause injury by doing it, then it's all your fault. You cannot say, but it was an emergency, but my patient was critical, but no, nobody wants to hear it. Once you bend the law, a motor vehicle law, and then that causes somebody to be injured or property damage, it's all your fault. You chose to go outside the limits of the law. Therefore, and then it is absolutely 100% now your responsibility to show due regard to make sure that the very thing that the law was trying to prevent doesn't happen. Everybody else, as long as they stay within the law, and then something bad happens, they can say, hey, it's not my fault. The law said I could do it, and the fact that it happened means it's not my fault. But the the ambulance operator is now outside of the law, so the law will not protect you if you cause damage or injury. So you can only do these things when you are going lights and sirens, which means you had justification for going lights and sirens. Okay, right-of-way privileges. Lights and sirens are only a request for right-of-way. It's not a guarantee. Just because you have lights and sirens on doesn't mean you can run through a red light and expect that everybody else will stop for you. In fact, that's one of the most common causes of accidents that you'll see on the YouTube videos. Ambulances blowing through the red light, and then cars coming the other way that had the green, was not expecting you, and they finally saw your lights and sirens, but too late to react, because remember the 3-second rule? They didn't have 3 seconds to react in time, and then they collide into the ambulance. So just because you have lights and sirens doesn't mean you are guaranteed to be safe, that everybody will get out of your way. It's only a request for everybody else to get out of your way. And how do you do that will be in another slide. Okay. So this is maybe I should move this here. That, because this is what I just said. It does not protect you from liability if by going outside the law you cause injury and harm, damage. Okay, so how do we do that? And then, okay, so here's one thing you can do. No parking zones. Ambulances often park at a fire hydrant or a no parking zone, or even in front of a ramp, in front of a garage driveway, places where everybody else is not allowed to park, or at the corner, and they seem to get away with it. Why? It's a courtesy. The traffic cop who normally gives the ticket for illegal parking sees that it's an ambulance there, and they just assume that this crew must be responding to a medical emergency. So out of the goodness of their heart, they choose not to give the ticket. But actually they're supposed to. When they see any vehicle parked illegally, they're supposed to put a ticket on. But it's a courtesy. It's like professional courtesy for them not to give the ticket. Now what if you did park at a hydrant, and then when you come out with the patient, you picked up the patient, you're coming them back to the ambulance, and there's a parking ticket. Well, what are you supposed to do? Well, you give it to your supervisor. You don't pay it yourself. After all, the registration is not in your name. It's in the ambulance agency's name, so they can't really, it's going to take a couple of steps for them to trace it back to you. So you just give it to your supervisor, and the supervisor will probably pay it. It's kind of extra few steps to fight it in court. Sometimes they just pay it. But usually the ambulance does not get a ticket. Going through stop signs, red lights. Okay, so because the cars coming the other way, the cars that are used to having the right of way, because they have the green, or they've already done the stop at the stop sign, so they're advancing, and here comes you with your lights and sirens. It's happening too fast. Now, why are they just becoming aware of you? Haven't they heard your siren from miles away? No. Sirens don't carry that far. In my experience, people don't really notice there's a siren until the ambulance is about a block away, maybe 2 blocks at most, a block away, because there's always a siren somewhere in New York City. While I was recording this video, there were 2 sirens already passed by. Maybe it was too quiet for the microphone to pick it up, but some siren off in the distance was for somebody. Does that mean everybody in the audio range, maybe like everybody a half a mile in radius, has to stop? No. Everybody goes their own way, and everybody assumes that the siren they hear in the distance does not apply to this part of the road. So nobody pays attention to it. It's only when the volume of the siren gets overwhelming that the cars finally notice, oh, okay, so maybe this one is here. But by then, it's only a matter of seconds. If the ambulance is going like 20 miles per hour, then in a block, it's only a few seconds for it to reach the car, the other motorists. So they only get like a few seconds warning. And then many cars play music so loud that they don't even hear that. There have been cars that passed me on the road who are playing their bass so loud that it's making my car vibrate. So there's no chance at all that they're going to hear a siren outside of their window, and it's an ambulance trying to get the right of way will catch them completely by surprise. So what are you supposed to do to make sure you don't get in an accident at a red light, at a stop sign? What you do is you come to the edge of each lane. So typically standard size intersection is 4 lanes wide, right? 2 lanes per direction, so that's 4 lanes. So what you do is 4 times you go to each lane, come to a full stop, look side to side, make sure that all cars on that lane sees you and is come to a stop. And then you advance to the next lane, come to a full stop, again look side to side, make sure that lane there are no cars continuing to come at you. And then the 3rd lane and the 4th lane, and now you've passed the intersection, and now you can go back to being on your way. That is how you pass a red light. You don't just drive screaming through a red assuming everybody will stop. That's how ambulances get into accidents. That's half of the reason why ambulances get into accidents on those YouTube videos, or maybe 40%. The other 40% is ambulances trying to do a left turn, and the cars coming the other way don't react in time. The ambulance thinks the other cars, the oncoming cars, can see them, but actually they didn't. And then, so that's 40, that's 80. What about the other 20%? That's other random stuff, like ambulances going too fast for the curve of the road, and the ambulance just rolls over. And then there's a few like on icy roads, and they slip and slide, etc. And then there's occasionally a few videos where the ambulance driver is distracted. The ambulance driver is watching their phone instead of watching the road, and they slam right into the car in front of them. Speed limit. So they will give it a pass. They will allow you to be a little bit over the speed limit, same way that they allow everybody else to go a little bit over the speed limit. But this time, if the ambulance goes a little bit over the speed limit and then hits somebody, that's it. The ambulance driver is now 100% at fault. There's no defense. There's no defense left for you. So how do you avoid hitting a pedestrian while going over the speed limit? You show due regard, head on a swivel, situational awareness, continuously alert, show due regard. That's that phrase. They keep saying it all and over again. It gets a little annoying, but it's like this catch-all phrase, meaning that now you have 100% responsibility to ensure everybody is safe. There's one law you cannot violate, no matter how important you think you are. You may not pass a school bus that is stopped to load or unload children. If they got that red light out blinking, you cannot pass. Doesn't matter if your patient is in the back in cardiac arrest, does not matter. You cannot pass this bus. After all, you don't want to kill a child in order to save your patient. It does not matter. You have no excuse. You cannot pass a school bus loading or unloading children. What are you supposed to do? You have a critical patient in the back, and the school bus has its red light out. You keep honking that horn. You keep making an annoyance of yourself until the school bus driver finally secures the children, makes absolutely sure no kid is about to run out into the middle of the road, and then now the bus driver is confident enough to turn off their red blinker, and now you can continue. Don't run over a child in order to save your patient. It's not going to go well for you in the court of law. Okay, and then there are other things like going the wrong way on a one-way street, blocking a one-way street because you couldn't find parking and you had to reach your patient. So these things, the most traffic cops will let it go out of courtesy, and as long as you show due regard. Now, that's if your lights and sirens are on. When can you turn them on? And it's only when you are going to a call where the nature of the call sounds like you have to hurry, or you have a critical patient. That's it. You're not allowed to use lights and sirens just because you don't feel like waiting at the red light, which you may have seen happen. As a pedestrian, as a civilian, you may have seen an ambulance come to a red light, turn on its lights, cross the red, and as soon as it's through the other side, it turned off its lights and it moseyed on out of there casually as you go. One of two things happened. Either that ambulance driver abused their authority, as you suspected, or, and this has happened to me many times, quite a few times, we are at the red light heading to a fast food place to get a meal, and then we get a call. And you go 10-4, 6-3, turn on the lights and sirens, due regard, clear the lanes at the red light, and then off we go. But then like half a block later, we get the radio call back and saying, Unit 7, 87, that it's a dupe. And what 87 is a dupe, meaning that 87 means cancel your call. It's a duplicate. The dispatcher figured out that two separate 911 callers are talking about the same job, about one patient. And so the ambulance that's closest will get the job, and the ambulance that was further away will be canceled, 87. And I was the one further away. So we go, oh, okay, and we turn off the lights and sirens, and we go back to normal driving. And anybody who's seeing us do that would think, oh, look at them, abusing their authority, turning lights on just to pass a red. No, that's not what we want to do. We're not in any hurry. We're a little hungry, but we're not in that big of a hurry. As I said before, your ambulance is top heavy and heavier, and so extra speed makes rollovers it's much more likely to roll over as you go faster. It takes longer to come to a full stop after you slam on the brakes. You have larger blind spots. Depending on the makeup of your ambulance, you may not have a rear view mirror. You're completely dependent on that rear facing camera, And so, due regard, you have to drive ever more carefully with an ambulance than you would in a regular automobile. Test question. A common favorite test question on the state exam. Police escorts. Police escorts make your situation more dangerous, not less dangerous. And the reason is the police escort will drive ahead of you. They may have their lights and sirens on, trying to clear a path for you, and you think, oh, nice. So their sirens are going, my sirens are going, extra, extra loud, everybody will get out of the way. But the problem is most civilians cannot hear that there are two emergency vehicles about to pass by. They hear the sirens, they pull over, and then as the police car passes by, they think, that's it. The lane is now mine, and they veer back into the lane. But that's when you run up and then you hit them, or they hit you. So that is the most common way to get into an accident with police escorts. Especially here in New York City in rush hour, so the two vehicles are going down the left-hand lane, pushing everybody aside. But then what do New Yorkers do? As soon as the emergency vehicle passes, they see this lane is like wide open, but only for a second. And so they jump back into that lane to try to take advantage of that police car ahead of them. So it is more likely, it's very likely that civilians will veer into your lane just as you're about to pass by. You have to be extra careful about that. Some people say you should change your siren to sound different than the police. Yeah, I guess that kind of helps. But most civilians don't know the difference. There is a certain ambulance company who play multiple different sirens at the same time as they go. And I think New Yorkers are starting to get used to that. They're starting to get used to the sound of multiple sirens coming from one vehicle. It's kind of like the boy who cried wolf story. Anyway, it's dangerous. What are the times when you do want an escort? Well, police can do things that police do, right? If you need something done that only police can do, then now you need an escort. If there's an angry mob or there's a crowd, then police are great at clearing the crowd to create a path. So you, depending on them. What if the police know where the patient is, or they know where the way out is? Then you have to follow them. So sometimes you need them. But you don't need police escort, let's say, to drive through Queens to the hospital. You know how to get there. Your GPS will tell you how to get there. You don't need police assistance. The last time I checked, the average response time for ambulances in the 5 boroughs of Manhattan was 7 minutes. I'm sure it can be looked up, Googled, whatever it is. But of course, your own personal experience can vary because of these different reasons. The longest it ever took me to go to a patient was 30 minutes. And that's because I was on Northern Boulevard in Queens, parked at the KFC. It's across the street from the Lotte supermarket. And then we got a call for somebody in cardiac arrest in Jamaica. So South Queens. And that sounds ridiculous, like we're so far away, but apparently no other medic unit was available. So that's it. They would like to send somebody closer, but nobody was closer. And this was rush hour. So taking the Van Wyck was out of the question. So we had to take the side streets all the way down from North Queens to South Queens. It took us 30 minutes. Everybody is used to their GPS. I'm used to the GPS. But I grew up in a time when we had no GPS, and so I am also familiar with paper maps. Are you familiar with a paper map? What happens if your GPS fails? During the Hurricane Sandy I was part of a crew responding to the Far Rockaways, and all the cell towers were out. There was no electricity in the Rockaways, so no. We call it GPS, but that's actually just a Google service, and nobody had internet. What are you going to do then? You're going to have to read the paper map. So it would be worth it for you to learn about paper maps and navigating with it. Sometimes GPS is wrong as well, right? Okay. Wear your seatbelts. I had a driver who refused to wear a seatbelt, and I kept telling him, you really should wear it, and then he said, don't worry, I'm a very good driver. Right. So I've watched a lot of car crash videos on YouTube, and at least one thing they all had in common was that the accident happened in less than a second. Everything was perfectly normal, usual, and then less than a half second later, everything changed, and people's lives would change forever. You don't get your response times. Human response times are not fast enough for most of those situations. So I tried to tell him, it's not about you. We have a lot of idiots on the road, but he just wouldn't listen. By the way, that's a firing offense. Not wearing a seatbelt is grounds for getting fired. And we have cameras showing the driver and passenger compartment, not the patient compartment because of HIPAA, but he's been on video all the time, so I don't know how long he lasted in that company. Or hopefully the supervisor finally told him, wear your seatbelt or you're fired. Normal vehicle operations also apply to you. Okay. Okay, so if you're responding to a call and it's a MCI, a mass casualty incident, then other vehicles are coming, other emergency vehicles are coming. So the question now becomes, where do you park? If it's like on a highway, where do you park? And sometimes your textbook says upstream. Sometimes it says downstream. You should wear your high-vis vests, the yellow jackets that go over. You should wear your bunker gear, which is the tough, thick jacket and pants that is fire resistant and also has reflective lines. Get out the cones and flares to alert other vehicles. Try not to back up because the scene is chaotic. Okay. So sometimes you're told to park 100 feet upstream or 100 feet downstream, or uphill or upwind for hazmat. And there's the hazmat lecture at the end of the semester. Turn off your headlights. Leave your warning lights on, but turn off your headlights because nobody needs your headlights anymore. And your headlights are likely to blind the first responders trying to walk around your vehicle. Leave your warning lights on so that oncoming cars can see you are there, but turn off your headlights. Also, headlights and fog lights drain the car battery. Chances are you turned off the engine to save, so that nobody can climb in and drive away with your ambulance. And so you turned off the motor and took the keys with you, which means you are now draining the battery. And the last thing you want is to get back into the ambulance with your patient and find that your battery is dead. So turn off your headlights that really suck on the battery. So what does upstream and downstream mean? Here's the accident scene, and if you are first on scene, you want to park here. If you're first on scene, you want to park here and at an angle with the back facing the curb, because if you bring your patient in, you want to put the patient in from the curb to the ambulance, not from this side of the street into the ambulance, right? So you want the ambulance to be facing into the other lane. And so the purpose of parking 100 feet upstream is so that if there's a distracted motorist coming and didn't notice your lights, doesn't see your flares, and just plows into you, at least it will hit your ambulance and not you or your patient who were, by the way, busy over here. And now, if you are not the first on scene, then somebody else already is here. Or if you are the first and other emergency vehicles start arriving and then a fire truck arrives, they will park upstream because they are bigger and heavier, so they will do a better job of blocking any distracted motorists. Then you're supposed to take your ambulance and move 100 feet downstream. So the short of it is, if you're first on scene, park upstream. If you're not first, or a fire truck arrives, then you move downstream. A benefit of being downstream is that there's all this commotion, all this chaos, all this obstruction here. Once you have the patient in your ambulance, it's time to go. And so it's much easier for you to just get in here when you're downstream and just drive away, because this entire stretch of road is now wide open. But if you were upstream, then you'd have to drive around obstructions, etc. So that's the answer. When you get this question on the state exam, pay attention to the question and explain where it says whether you are first on scene or second on scene. Set the parking brake. Ever since I started working on the ambulance, I got into the habit of setting the parking brake on my own personal car. And there are lots of YouTube videos of cars where the owner forgot, and then something about the situation made the regular brake fail, and the car just rolled away and then got damaged or caused other damages. Stay away from bad stuff. That's the hazmat situation. Stay away from electrical wires. Okay. All right, so you are now on the scene and you've gotten the patient. What do? So secure the patient to the stretcher, 3 straps minimum, and then put the stretcher on the ambulance. In the ambulance, they'll show you how to hook the front of the stretcher onto that thing. There's a hook there. It secures that end of the stretcher. That way, one of you can lift the back end, and then your partner can pull up on the wheels. Then the whole thing will slide right in. And then there's a set of horns over all the way at the front of the patient cabin, where that will lock into this part of the stretcher. And then there's a clamp here on the left side wall that will lock into about here on the stretcher, and there the stretcher is secured. Unfortunately, we don't have a way to simulate that in class, but it's not that complicated thing to learn. So on your first day on the job, you will act as a third, kind of like what you did on your rotation. There'll be a full crew and you as a third, and this time instead of just showing you how things are done, the crew is going to watch you. They're going to make you do all the work as a third. You are a full employee of the agency now. They're going to make you do all the teching, and they're going to watch that your knowledge and skills are up to snuff. And then after like 2 or 3 or 4 times, they'll sign off. Each time they say, yeah, you're good, yeah, you're good. And then finally the supervisor will say, that's enough paying extra for a third. You are now going to go out there, you and a partner, hopefully a senior partner, and you're on your own, captains of your own boat. So on the first day, the crew will show you how this mechanism happens, and it's pretty easy to learn. You'll pick it up real quick. So by like the second time or the third time, it'll be easy. So don't worry too much about that. Okay. So notice that they're in the snow, so they've bundled up the patient real nice to keep her warm. Not super warm, because they're only going to have her outside for a few minutes until they get her into the ambulance, and then they'll turn up the heater, I'm sure. So it doesn't have to be super warm. A good thing to do is to have the patient's winter coat over on top. So after you've bundled up the patient with bed sheets and towels, and then layer the patient's own personal winter coat on top, and then strap it all in, because they're going to need that winter coat when they come home from the hospital after this is all over. Okay? Do your patient assessment as appropriate. Sometimes you want to move to the ambulance right after the primary. Sometimes you move to the ambulance after the secondary. It all depends on the call. Minimum of 3 straps, chest, waist, and above the knees. Not below the knees, above the knees. Especially with altered mental status patients or psychiatric patients, they can kick out of the knee straps if it's below the knees. But if the straps are above the knees, they can't slip their legs out. Minimum 3. In fact, say that on your PCR. Say that in your narrative. Well, don't say that if you didn't do it, but I'm assuming you did it, and then make sure you say it. Because later, if somehow the patient, I don't know, freed themselves, at least on the narrative you said that you did everything right, and then the patient was a kind of escape artist. That's not your fault if they are an ex-Navy SEAL or something, but at least you did everything you're supposed to. EMTs or EMS is supposed to be seatbelted in during the ride to the hospital. I don't know what you saw on your rotation. Sometimes the provider does not use the seatbelt in order to take care of the patient, and I can see why, because it's forcing you to like strain forward in order to reach the patient with your hands. But you're really supposed to wear the seatbelt or be harnessed at all times, because you never know when an accident might happen and the ambulance does a rollover. And then if you are not secured, you're going to ping pong around inside that ambulance, and things will go flying and you're just going to get hurt. Absolutely, the patient has to be secured at all times. Otherwise, the patient will flop around in the ambulance while it's rolling over. And then that is absolutely 100% all your fault. Res ipsa loquitur. Remember that in the lecture 3 legal, chapter 3. So secure the patient or it's your fault. Secure, as I said, you will learn how to do it. It's quick, it's fun, it's easy to remember, easy to learn. Take care of the patient appropriately. Pause here, read this. You may be allowed to have one family member ride along, and so you have to seatbelt them or harness them into the bench. And it's good to have family along because they provide emotional, psychological support for the patient, and somebody to be there in a strange, unfamiliar hospital, and somebody to help them come home. Somebody to have ready access to their own phone so they can keep other family members up to date. So it's good to have a ride along, but they have to make sure they stay out of your way. Let the dispatcher know you left, and the ETA to the hospital. Continue your secondary, continue your ongoing. Call notifying ahead if the situation is critical. Check every 5 or 15 depending. Do not abandon the patient emotionally. What does that mean? Depending on the call, sometimes the EMT is tempted to just focus in on their laptop and start filling out their PCR, and just ignoring the patient. Remember, this, it could, for you, it's just a Tuesday, but for the patient, it could be the worst day of their life. It could be the scariest time of their life. So you don't have to say anything profound or poetic or epic, but just let them know that you are there, you're listening, you care, and you're keeping an eye on them. That's all. Just don't let them feel abandoned, like a package, a box, like a box on an Amazon truck. Just let them know you care, and you're still there with them. For children especially. Last week you saw that on that video clip, the EMTs or the medics who had dolls for their pediatric patients. That's a little above and beyond because the dolls get a little pricey. I have the Band-Aids. They're like $5 a box, and I buy 2 boxes, and they last about a week before I run out and have to replace one of the boxes. So that's about right. Alternate genders for your various patients might be a good idea if you can, if that's possible. You're now at the hospital. What you do is you come to a park and then put in the parking brake, take the patient into the emergency room, and there you get to the triage line. And depending on how busy the hospital is that night, it's going to be a long line. And unless it's a critical patient that you call notification ahead, if that's the case, then you jump right to the front of the line and say, I called a note. But if you didn't, then you go to the back of the line and you just wait. You work your way up to the front of the line finally, and the triage nurse turns around and says, what you got? And then you present your patient. While you're waiting, one thing you could do, and this is not in your notes, but one thing you could do is use the nursing ER equipment to get a set of vitals. And you do it as a courtesy. It's not your vitals anymore. Once you enter a hospital, that's it. Your PCR is ended. You should not add any more information. But the set of vitals you're getting this time in the hospital is numbers for the nurse, so that the nurse doesn't have to do it themselves. And it's a professional courtesy. They appreciate it because it's one less thing for them to do. Assuming they trust you, they know you're competent at vitals. Not everybody is. So, but one thing I'll tell you, manual blood pressure is more accurate than the machine. Did you know that? Did I tell you that? After about a year of working full-time in EMS, your manual blood pressure scales will be more accurate than those $10,000 BP machines they have in the ER. And so the nurses will appreciate it. After the triage nurse signs your PCR, they'll say put which bed put the patient in. You do that, transfer the patient to the bed, and then you get the patient's signature. You wish the patient, you give the patient your best wishes, and then you clean everything that you brought into the hospital, the stretcher. You throw away all disposables, and then you go back to your ambulance and you clean up, terminating the call. So you go back to the ambulance and clean up, restock. And so what does that mean, restock at hospital? You don't help yourself to the hospital equipment. What happens is some of your cabinets have like extra supplies. It's usually in the bottom cabinets. They have like backup supplies. So that's above and beyond the limits of the requirements of the 800. And so any item you used in the top shelves, you replace with the items from the extra backup supplies. And if you start to get dangerously low on the backup supplies, Then you need to go back to base and replace those. Oh, there is one thing you need to get from the hospital, which is the bed sheets. Right? Assuming that you brought in 2 sheets, one for the mattress, one for the patient, to cover the patient, then you are entitled to get 2 sheets out of the hospital. Now, that's a point of contention here. This is a bit of a rivalry between EMS and nurses, in that EMS tends to take more than 2 sheets, because these are hospital sheets. They're cleaned, they've been sterilized, so we can kind of trust them. And so we like to have extra sheets for ourselves, for our own personal use while on the shift. And also, it's always good to have extra sheets in case we need it for the patient. Just 2 is not enough. And so we tend to like sneak out not just 2 that we brought in, but like more than 2. And the nurses caught on and they don't like it. And so they try to, it's like cops and robbers. We try to sneak out extra sheets. The nurses try to stop us from doing that. And it's this little warfare that goes on every time. Some nurses are understanding and they turn the other way, look the other way. Some nurses like try to police us and stop us from doing it. And it's just different for every individual. Other than that, everything else you're not supposed to take out of the hospital. You're supposed to get it out of your own agency. After all, through that insurance, your agency will be reimbursed for every item you used. In that case, the agency is getting that money so they can use it to buy more stuff. Why are you taking stuff out of the hospital? Now, for the ambulance, you're supposed to wipe down everywhere the patient has been. If the patient bled all over the floor, then, or body fluids got all over the floor, then you're supposed to wipe down. Now, I would not go on hands and knees. I would not let the patient's body fluids have any chance of soaking into my pants. So being on the knees, not something I would do. But you have a mop, you have a bucket. If it's that bad, what you do is you go back to base. You tell the dispatch, put us out administrative BBP, bloodborne pathogens. Put us out administrative BBP, and the dispatcher knows you want to come back to base to scrub the floor of the ambulance, wipe down that, because you had a lot of body fluids. And then depending on if there's been a lot of blood, then you get the hose, you hose down the floor, and then you disinfect with bleach, 1 part bleach, 9 parts water. Okay. Okay. Air means like let the air out of the cabin, clear, ventilate the air. Sure. Refuel if you're a little low. Restock. And so if you go back to base for restock, that means you are not only restocking all the top shelves, but you're restocking all the bottom shelves, keeping track of what parts, which items you used. Dispose of all things that are disposable, are single use. Disinfect things that are reused, are meant to be reused. Replace, don't refill. You know what, let me get rid of that. We have no business refilling. So replace oxygen cylinders. If one of your tanks is a little low, like under 1,000, it's a good idea. I know in the state written exam, you're not allowed to use a tank when it's below 200 psi. But let's say it's 300. That doesn't leave a lot for the next patient, right? So what if your next patient needs constant high flow oxygen for 30 minutes? Then that's not going to do it. So you would rather leave the base with full tanks. You're supposed to have 2 at minimum, 2 full tanks at minimum. So if you come back to base for a restock, then take the tank you've been using and just switch it out. Just switch it out. no matter what the level. Well, if it's below 1,000, switch it out. The last agency I worked for, their policy was if it's below 700, switch it out. I think in New York City, the common policy is below 500 psi, switch it out. So if the state written exam asks, the answer is 200 psi. In real life, between 500 to 1,000 psi, you just replace the tank. So tell dispatch you're restocking. They know, but you're not allowed to restock forever, right? Because that's like one of the oldest tricks in the book. If you hang on that restock tone, and then eventually the dispatch is going to get suspicious, right? So be reasonable. Take that opportunity to go to the bathroom, I guess, but don't like stop at a restaurant and then finish up your call. I've never called for medevac air rescue. This is all just academic for me. But anyway, sometimes you may need to send a patient by helicopter because the road trip to the hospital will take just too long, and the patient's situation is so critical that they can't wait for the road trip. How critical? So it's no longer just a problem with ABCs or mental status. Now this patient is literally bleeding to death, or some other situation where minutes literally do count. Because last time I checked, the medevac ride is about $100,000. An ambulance ride without insurance is about $1,000 to begin with, and then every little thing the EMS crew does for the patient is padded to the bill. The air medevac starts at $100,000, and then every little thing they do for this patient, and they're going to do a lot because it's that critical, the patient is that critical, it keeps adding to the bill. Now, hopefully the patient's insurance will handle some of that, but if the patient is just a little bit stiff breather because of COPD, and the ride to the hospital is like 30 minutes, maybe you don't want to call for medevac. Being on a non-rebreather is fine, but you won't know that until you've properly assessed the patient. Anyway, so here in shock, the problem with shock is the way we teach shock in BLS. It seems like pretty straightforward, right? Shock position, warm with a blanket, high concentrated oxygen, rapid transport. There, see, simple. It's not really that simple. It's actually pretty complicated. Even paramedics are a little bit in over their head when the patient is going into full shock. So this is where minutes literally count, depending on what's causing the shock. A GCS less than 10, that's pretty bad. Remember, what's the best GPS, and then you're down from there. A head injury that causes AMS, that's really concerning because of the brain is so fragile. Chest trauma because the heart and lungs are in there, so that's kind of concerning. That's really scary. Penetrating injuries to the body cavity. So there's a reason to consider. And so now, sometimes you're not the one who makes the decision, but what you can do is call dispatch, call medical control, call supervisor, and they have to then approve the air rescue. They will make the call for medevac, decide. And medevac can happen in New York City. They can land in Central Park, I believe. Some of the intersections in New York City can be cleared, although it's kind of risky because if the buildings are extra tall, that's really dangerous for the helicopter. But I've heard that medevac can land in some places, even in Manhattan. Baseball fields, soccer fields, football fields, great place to land a helicopter. But usually it's not your place to say. You just suggest it to supervisor, and then your supervisor decides if the medevac is justified. Other reasons here, again, you said something about the call, something about this patient makes you scared, makes you worried. You call supervisor, and then the supervisor says, yeah, okay. And then in that case, it's the supervisor or dispatch who are handling the communication with medevac, and so they will do the information, etc. You are the one on scene, so they're going to depend on you to describe what the pilot can expect that might be a risk to the helicopter. Okay, state exam question. They love asking this. If you are asked to choose a landing zone for the medevac, it has to be 100 by 100 feet. And yeah, 100 by 100 feet. It's pretty much the answer that you look for. The ways to approach a helicopter as it's landing. Never from the back. Never, ever, ever from the back. And you really want to approach the way the pilot can see you. So there's this cone of vision for the pilot, preferably from the front, because they're usually looking straight ahead, although it's the pilot's responsibility to look side to side. So, but front's best, right? And then, okay, and so that's up to, you approach from the front up to the 100 by 100 perimeter, but then do not cross that 100, do not cross the landing zone perimeter until you are instructed to by the flight crew. So, and then also one more thing, if you have no choice but to choose a landing zone that's a bit of an incline, then never approach from the top, right? Because the rotors have to stay horizontal to gravity, or no, perpendicular to gravity, not perpendicular to the ground, in order so the helicopter doesn't slide away, which means the rotors will be closer to the ground uphill and further from the ground downhill. So you should approach from the left. So there are three answers, right? Approach from the front, approach from downhill, or approach when the crew tells you. Those are three potential answers. So which one are you supposed to pick on the state exam? And here's the clue. How far away from you are you from the helicopter? If you're far away and you're getting closer to the landing zone, then you approach from downhill. As you get near to the landing zone, do not cross, but stand in front of the helicopter so the pilot can see you, and stay there until the crew tells you what to do, and they'll show you which side to approach from, usually the downhill side, etc. So do not enter the landing zone until one of the crew tells you to. So those are your answers. So the question should tell you how far away or how close you are to the helicopter. That'll decide your approach. So it's been a long lecture. There's been a lot to say, but you've heard enough from me to do well on this chapter in EMS. So thank you for listening, and best of luck to you.